Yes, we are live, and good morning to everybody watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and also Facebook, probably listening to us in Clubhouse. It's really a pleasure to have you with us here. First of all, I have to say I apologize for my voice this morning because I got a cold, and that's the best voice I could get in such circumstances. So today I would like to introduce our first time guest, Deron Dean Raynolds. He's a music engineer and producer, a singer, songwriter, arranger, film composer, professional piano man, music instructor, and music teacher. And he's also Japanese and English translator, interpreter, and copywriter. So how can you put all of these things together? It's amazing. And
He's a Renaissance man.
yes, a Renaissance man indeed.
Hey, you guys are going to make me blush this early in the morning. Yeah,
No,
I
I
don't.
love this.
I do. I do a lot of stuff. Everyone talks about my juggling act most of the time, whatever job I'm doing. I do lots of different things, but yeah, I mean, really, education's a big one too. But I use my language skills. I mean, I
Yes.
speak English as a native speaker, and I speak Japanese. I studied really hard to learn Japanese and learn to read and
Yes.
write.
But we
So
definitely want to hear your Japan story right after Maya. You introduce our sponsors, right?
Oh, yes, yes, very much
Look
so.
forward to it, Darren. All
Yes,
right.
thank you, Tim, for that. And I want to say once again to give a thank you, word of thank you to our first sponsor, Kanachu, or as they are also known, Kanachu, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku. You can find them online at kanachu.com and connect also with James Howell on LinkedIn or via email at james@kanachu.com. They do buying and selling real estate in Yokohama. They do real estate investment and property management as well. So if you have any of these projects in mind or such projects in mind, reach out to James and do not hesitate to talk with him. He's an English speaker. He can speak with you either in English or in Japanese, and I'm sure that Kanacho will do their best to meet your needs and customize their services to them. So thanks a lot to Kanacho and James, and we are back to the story that we wanted to hear from Darren today.
Just a quick note about James. He got here, what, 2 years ago?
Yes, I think it's about
I
2 years.
can't believe how
Yes.
good his Japanese got in 2 years. Like he
wow.
really dug in and did. And James is actually coming out to see me and Atami on
Mm,
Saturday. Have lunch together, so I look forward to
yeah.
seeing him. But right
Sweet.
on. Now it's the spotlight goes on Darren. So Maya, I know you got a few words to introduce him, and then we'll
Yes.
let Darren introduce himself.
Yes, Darren, it's over to you because I don't want to repeat myself. So let us know what is your Japan story, and from there we can dive into the topic, which I love, by the way. That
Yes.
yes, Japanese people do not have imaginary friends. So let's go.
Okay, well, it started back in high school. I was lucky to have a Japanese class available to me. Like when I was in high school, it was right around the time when Japan was booming with the economic, boom at the time in the late 80s. I was a freshman in 88. So I was lucky I had a class I could take as an elective to learn Japanese. And once I started learning it, and I started paying attention to the culture that was right around me. It's a lot of Asian culture in the Northwest near Seattle, a lot of Japanese culture, a whole lot of Nikkeijin there, like people that grew up in America but Japanese ancestry. So I started learning about that. My dad started introducing me to his clients that had been to Japan. I saw a pachinko machine for the first time, and I was like, wow. Well, it's like an upside down pinball machine. So cool. And now I hate pachinko. like
I
it was,
hate it.
I hate it. I hate it now, but at the time it would look cool. I was a kid, and I looked at manga for the first time. I was like, whoa, this is cool. And I saw futon for the first time, and I was like, wow, they sleep on the floor. Cool. you know, uh, all the silly things at first, but then, yeah, I mean, I got interested. We had exchange students at our house a few times. I started learning, doing origami. I learned more about the culture. I picked up a few words. And because I was studying it at high school, I studied it in college. I spent a year at Aoyama Gakuin, which is up there in Tokyo. Great school. I really learned a lot living in Japan for a year and studying. And I pounded the kanji in my head. I learned everything I could to read and write better and speak better. And I started doing music too. While I was over here, I was in a couple successful bands while I was there. I was really into using my skills as a piano player and finding ways to make new music, new pop music. I'm also very much a blues aficionado. I love blues music. So I tried to use those skills, played in a few bands, spent a year, got a cup of coffee, checking out Japan, got the Japanese girlfriend, all those different things, I was into it and then went back, finished my degree in Japanese language and literature, came back here, started on the JET program like a lot of people around my age did. Probably all heard of the JET program. If you haven't, that's the Monbusho, the Ministry of Education. They hire people directly, kind of like from colleges that just graduated. And I was placed in Osaka, which I was upset about at first.
Mhm.
I really wanted to go to Tokyo because I go, well, Tokyo's where the music scene is. This is where all the big music labels are. Yeah, and that's where I'm gonna get that's where I can get into that business. But I found out real quickly that Osaka was probably the better place. It was outside of Osaka, Takarazuka at first. Takarazuka is a cool place. I don't know if you guys have anybody's been there, but that's the Takarazuka review where the crazy gender bender women play men's parts and stuff like that, which I find fascinating. And lots of art and culture out this way too, kind of closer to Kobe. I went to Kobe a lot, Osaka a lot. And eventually, after teaching for a few years there, I got my chance to work at a music label. So I worked at Houze Music, which is a huge label. I was working with Mai K, Kuraki Mai, she's still around. She's still singing. She's doing lots of modeling and different stuff like that. She's a little older now, but she was a teenager at the time. I got to work with her songwriter, Hono Aika, who is also super uber talented and wrote music for all kinds of people. And I worked with all these different artists there. It's fun. I got to learn to use my songwriting skills. I learned about using the studio, became more of an official audio engineer, director, producer, doing that stuff. And so, I used my Japanese language ability to teach English, and now I do it to teach music, and I do interpreting and translation because I've learned to do those skills through the music label. I had to do business meetings in Japanese and English when American producers came over, and I had to learn to translate. I translated lyrics from Japanese to English, which is not easy. I also got to translate all kinds of business stuff. You get a lot of experience, hands-on experience that way. So that's why I got all those titles. And I'm a piano man now. I wasn't that at first. I am now because that's great work. It's fun to play music and sing and get paid for it, And I have my bands around town. I got a couple bands. I'm doing music projects as a film composer, as you mentioned. Short film just came out called Life Echoes, which pretty proud of. I think it was cool short film. Lots of interesting stuff, making sounds, making music, background sounds. And for film, I do all kinds of those things I do many different things because, well, I've had the chance to do it. When you get the language ability here, you can find yourself doing all kinds of things. Acting, narration, heck, I've done all those things. But it wasn't all at once, and there were ups and downs. And definitely on the up now, thinking about this book idea. I'm excited about it. I am starting to interview people or set up interviews with lots of different folks. I want to get all kinds of perspectives And I want everyone to feel comfortable about the different subjects I'm writing, to the point where I'm checking with Japanese people. I'm checking with, like, all of my Filipino friends, all of my Black friends, all of my people from Europe, all these different people, that make sure that what I'm thinking is not just me. It's something that's kind of hopefully universal and a ring for everyone.
Yeah, I wanted to
Yeah,
say so that everybody, yes, just one thing, that the title of today's podcast is the intended title of the book Darren is talking
That's
about.
right.
So Japanese
That's
people
right.
do not have friends. So this is what I wanted to say, so that people could have an idea of what
That's
the topic, yes, and the book is. Yes.
it
if
sounds
if I looked
good.
distracted, I apologize. I was typing a message to my friend Elia Gaito, and
Mm.
he's also a piano guy
Oh,
who's making a living here. He's a really good pianist as well. And I told him to tune into our podcast now live if he's got access to it. So I
that's
wasn't
great.
ignoring you. I was trying to get a really good friend on to listen. Hopefully he will.
I'm used to being ignored most of the time. I'll talk in people's ears off, and then I'll just be like, "Okay, your turn." Sorry, I try to listen as much as I can, but, like, yeah, Japanese people don't have imaginary friends. I came up with this title a while ago just because I thought it was such a silly, weird thing that, like, seemed true. Like, everyone I asked, like, refused to say that they had an imaginary friend. Where I was telling my story of my imaginary friend, and, like I had a real imaginary friend. I had it was a lion named Sassy. Sassy the lion. And, like, he floated around in a hot air balloon and would come down and visit me and talk to me. And I talked to him, and nobody thought it strange at all. Well, they thought it was funny, but they didn't, like, say, like, "Oh, you're talking to ghosts," which, like, tends to be the feeling when I, like, try to talk about this subject. Well, so it was a ghost? No, no, it wasn't a ghost. It was, like, just inside my head. And, like, but it's a weird thing. Like, I think there's all kinds of reasons for this culturally, like, it might be true, but I'm tapping into that as a starting point, and then we're going to talk about all kinds of things in Japan that are odd. They're odd, I think, for most of us as expats, at least. And
Yeah.
then for Japanese people, they're used to it, but then they can see maybe that it is kind of odd, maybe, and learn something about themselves. But the basic emphasis of the book is it's okay, Japanese people, not to have imaginary friends. You be you. Japan, you should take care of yourself and think about it as being Japan. Japanese people can run Japan. Japanese people can be proud of the fact they don't have imaginary friends. Crying out loud. And all kinds of other things that I want to tap into in the book. Don't follow other countries or try to copy other things. Be yourself. Have your own identity. It's kind of the emphasis or basic plan of the book structure so far. Yeah.
I see a lot of that originality in the music world. Like, there's this myth that like you said, we were talking offline. Japanese are creative and that they're all the same, and that's not true. If you look at the tatemae of it, they seem to be all the same. But if you
Right.
get to the hone and you get to know them, you realize, Maya and I have talked about this many times, how incredibly diverse they are in their thought. They just don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily verbalize it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, But by the way, quick question: have you ever
Sure.
heard of an artist? He's no longer with us. Nishioka Kyozo. He was an Osaka folk singer.
That sounds very familiar to me. I
I
couldn't
loved
say
him.
well, I can't say for sure that I know who this is, but, like, that sounds familiar to me. A lot of folk singers, yeah, people that love folk, a lot of blues, a lot of jazz,
Yeah. Yes.
a lot of old school music that people are into here. But there's just as much new music too. There's just as much like cool new artists that I meet all the time. Hip hop's big here at the moment.
Oh yeah.
It's a big scene. I was so surprised. I'm just kind of tapping into it recently, but I'm going out and seeing a lot more of that because I grew up listening to that too. I mean, like, I like every style of music. I like country
Right.
western music. I know people think I'm nuts sometimes, but I love bluegrass. I love stuff like that. Japanese people do too. So, you meet all kinds of people and you try to get into all of those different artistic corners as much as you can because you never know what's going to click. It's worth a
Yeah.
try.
The Japanese really like American roots music too. I
Yes.
was shocked when I got here. Everybody is in love with Zabando, the band. They love the
Yes.
band.
Yes.
And all my in-laws, all my friends here in Atami, they're all into bluegrass and into country music, like old school, not the newer stuff,
Yeah.
but the traditional stuff.
Yeah.
It's
I also noticed that when I came to Japan, I got asked by relatives and some friends. So they seem to love also choir music, which is, I don't know what's the genre there, right?
or
But
yeah, yeah.
choir, yes. And they would
No,
ask me, chorus? Okay, sorry for my bad
No,
pronunciation,
no,
but they,
no.
it's
I mean,
called. It can be called both. It can
you
be
can
called
go both.
both.
right.
Yeah.
That's
But
what I
they
used to
would
do.
ask me, yes, they would ask me, okay, so do you have any CDs of Bulgarian core music? And I'm like, I don't know anybody singing that back home, And it turns out that there are quite a few actually choirs there,
Yeah.
choirs, right, that sing, but I just was not into that. And when I came to Japan, I realized, I learned something about my own country and the music that is produced there, which I didn't know when I was there. So it's a fascinating thing that really coming to Japan actually helps you also learn about things you were not aware of about your own country, your own culture, your own, music and everything.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
learned
True.
about the in Japan. I'm from Chicago, and I loved like the Allman Brothers, which was like blues derivatives, but it was still like we called it Southern rock, right?
Hmm.
And I come here, my roommate, he's a pro. I asked him, "Who's your influences?" He goes, "Oh, Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, blah blah blah." And he started teaching me about music from Chicago. I'm
Yes.
learning from a Yokohama Japanese dude, right? So
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
experience.
Well, so I think Chicago was a huge hub of blues music for a long time. Yeah, you tend to learn more about your own country, don't you, when you come over here?
Hmm.
I mean, you tend to learn. I think we all do. I think we look back and we see more. We understand ourselves better in some ways by putting it through this lens of like, oh wow, now I'm learning this culture and I can see what's interesting about that. Now I know more about, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been so hard on me being an American. Right? There's a lot of great things we did too. Sure, you got to take the bad with the good, and there's plenty of bad, but like I try to focus on the good. I really care about being an ambassador for my country, and I want people to learn about the magic of music and how cool things are. Like choir music, like I said, I think of gospel, like that seems to be the thing that a lot of Japanese people are really big into here, and that's pretty glorious music, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not just gospel, but like, I mean, like, there's lots of other types of choir stuff, and I teach that at the school I'm teaching at now too. Big choir competition every year. I mean, like, it's fun. All the kids singing, all of them really trying hard to win this simple school competition.
Yeah.
But that's how hard people try. They really get into it. And like, that's a good thing. That's one thing I love about Japan. Like people get really into things.
Art is baked into the culture. Art
Yeah.
and beauty is so woven into everything. You can just see all the Japanese I know have some artistic sensibility that they developed to a pretty good degree, right? So I
Yeah.
agree with that. I like the point you made about you learn about your own culture. And the analogy I use is a fish doesn't know what water. So the only way for you to know your
Mhm.
own culture is to step into another pond and then go back and say, "Oh, now I see it." And
Right.
that's exactly what happened to me. I knew
Mhm.
nothing about my culture before I came here. You know, so
I mean, I had an inkling, but like, it's like, I just, like, I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels, but I see so many people running away from something. Like, you could tell, it could be all kinds of different things, but a lot of people come here because they weren't happy about something, or they were like didn't like something about where they were, so they want to come
Mhm.
someplace new and they want to try living in it someplace new. So I mean, it's not every person. It's not always a dark story, or like sometimes it's funny things, but like it's tends to be like this a psychological motivation for coming here, I think. And so then you start reflecting about it, and like your family, your life, your friends, your culture, and everything. And yeah, I mean, the good and the bad. So, like I said, but musically, I'd say for America, I mean, that's where a lot of the base for most of the music we think of came from. And so, like, and like we've got the European roots, so the classical music traditions, and the of course, South American influences, African influences, everything coming together to kind of create the stew that eventually became jazz and blues and all these other things. There's all kinds of cool things that kind of happened in the US at the time because it was the hub of the world for a while. And like, boy, is it fun to study it and learn more about it from Japanese folks, kind of like what you're saying, Tim. It's hilarious. Like, I learn more sometimes about artists I like from people here that just study it more than me. So, like, yeah, it's can be a really cool thing. It's what's fun about
Yeah.
sharing culture and art.
I agree with you also that it's fascinating to see other people's perspectives and also learn from them, because sometimes if we don't get out of our own pond, we don't really get to know how others see us, and we get stuck into our own, let's say, our own little ways, right? And learning from other people, like you said, you learned from Japanese, let's say, critiques and probably. Um, um, Analysts and everything. So it really gives you a different view, or that angle is a very eye-opening angle. So I have noticed the same thing about, let's say, my own history back home. Not so much music as well, but more about the history and the culture of Bulgaria. So I think that it's actually a big advantage of, to be able to learn from people who see you from outside, who haven't really, or who are not trying to focus only on the good things, but both on the good and the bad together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what my book's going to be about, really. In the end, it's like it's talking about great things. It's funny in Japan,
Yeah.
and but taking that kind of humorous angle to hook people in, and then like talk about some serious stuff too, and talk
Hmm.
about kind of some of Japan's cultural malaise style problems, which
Yeah.
I can see a lot of those problems popping up. We got the depopulation problem. There's all kinds of there's empty houses all over the place in the countryside at the moment. There's a lot of great things, and then there's a lot of stuff that people don't really know about. And so I want people to know, why are there some giant cement poles in the middle of the freaking road? Like because it really feels like that at first, even though it's not to Japanese people. It's not in the middle of the road. You can go right around it. Yeah, well, it becomes a one-lane road, but sure, okay. Like, I mean, stuff like that, and it's gonna be funny. So the imaginary friend thing is the angle I started with.
Yes.
I figured that's kind of funny, isn't it?
It's a
And
good,
then
yeah, it's a good hook.
it's
I
a
like
cute
it.
Yeah.
idea, and like I don't know why Japanese people tend to not do this, but I have my theories. I don't know. Japanese people have great imaginations when it comes to ghosts and like the demon spirits and like
Yes.
all kinds of like yokai ningen cartoons, stuff like that, where there's just tons and tons and tons of all these weird spiritual beings that people can see. And like that's a totally cool accepted idea in Japan. And then people love ghost stories here. They love it.
Yes. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
And
we've
that's
got a lot of recent anime and also manga and everything about ghost stories and spirits and demons and everything, right?
demons. Yeah, like
Yes.
and I love that stuff, and I think it's cool. But yeah, it's not the same as having an imaginary friend, is it? There's a scene and there's the scene in oh, what's it called? Inside Out, like one of the Pixar films where she meets her imaginary friend still in her head, and they meet her, and I kept asking like my wife and people like, well, do you understand what that is? Like that's actually her made up friend from when she was a kid. And it's funny because they see this stuff in books and movies from other countries, and I don't know if they totally get what it means. It means that it's like a really made up friend, and that's a pretty normal thing in like most cultures, I think. That's I'm going to get into this more. I haven't studied every single culture yet. I got to admit this. But I'm thinking that in Bulgaria, they probably have imaginary friends. I mean, I don't know. I mean, kids probably did growing up.
Yeah.
I know in America, it's just not every kid does, but a lot of kids do. And like,
I have to confess, I did not have, I think I
okay.
lacked the imagination to have an imaginary friend, but in a different meaning, I have had friends who I imagined were my friends until they weren't, who I trusted as my friend. So in a sense, it was an imaginary friend. That's about the closest.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
I was joking with my friend Steve the other day. Like, it was, well, but what I mean by that title is not you and me drunk up on a roof singing Fiddler on the Roof. Okay, no. See, like, no. That's something very different. We might think we're imaginary, but we're definitely not. People might ignore us like we're imaginary, but we're not.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's been plenty of times where it kind of feels like that too, right? And I get it. You know, Japanese people have great imaginations, great creativity, and they're like all kinds of cool reasons to like love your stuffed animal so much. I see a lot of that in Japanese kids. I've taught lots and lots of kids, by the way. I taught international kindergarten for a long time. So I know all about all the things they love and all the characters they love, all the toys. Like, I mean, and I had all those toys when I was a kid. I was a big G.I. Joe guy. I had Transformers. Oh God, I loved all those toys, and just have huge giant wars with my little brother with all the toys we had. We would and Lego, right? Lego or Legos, as we like to say in America. Sorry, people who don't like that S. It's too bad. It's like we just in North America, we just decided, you know, if you don't put an S at the end of it, you're communist.
Yeah.
I'm joking. I know
that's a very Cold War reference.
It's
right. Yes, very much so. No,
it's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke.
No,
like,
yeah, the labels have changed nowadays. But if you don't mind me, I really got. Yes, I thought that I wanted to ask you about one of the chapters in your book. But before I do that, yes, allow me to. To talk and to say thank you to our other sponsor today, and that is Houze. So the company's name is Houze, or they are also known as Houze Inc. You can find them online at the with the website, which is here on screen at the moment, houze.co.jp, and you can connect with them via the email, which is on screen as well. Now, one thing is that you can talk with them either in English or in Japanese, because Hana Urushizawa Howell is there, and she can really see what you want to do with them, either in English or in Japanese. So the company does custom home design and construction. They also do commercial building construction. If you have any of these projects in mind, actually, do not hesitate to connect with them. And again, you can reach out to Hana, who is on LinkedIn. She writes very good posts there as well, like James. And you can talk with her either in written or over the phone or in person. So thanks a lot to Houze for being our sponsor. And we're back to the questions and the answers which we have. So Deron, I wanted to ask you about one of the chapters. It is actually the second chapter, and I found it so funny. An isolated nation that loves barbarians.
Yes.
So it's funny because it goes to me, you know, my very simple way of thinking. The line of thought is like, I hear a lot of people, or I used to hear a lot of people complaining that there is a lot of baked-in racism here in Japan and this and that. But at the same time, we know that for many foreigners, it's very easy, or not very easy, but probably relatively easy to find their sweet spot in this beautiful country, right? And I don't know how it is for the people or the individuals who are watching us or listening to us now, but I want to say, what made you come up with this title? An isolated nation that loves barbarians.
And real quick though, Darren, you referenced what was it? Being an ambassador. That's what I always say too. Like it really
Yes,
resonates because you can complain about baked-in racism, and it does exist. But you know what? My country, I shouldn't be throwing stones at anybody. And
right,
also, and I think you guys will agree, it's not malicious. It's ignorance
exactly.
based. Easy to
Yeah,
win over if you're a good ambassador. Going back to
yes,
what you can look at it in a positive way to convert people, and we've all done it. I know we all have, Maya too. So, and later I'll send you a link to an article I wrote: how a bearded barbarian won over his Japanese mother-in-law.
yeah, I love that article. It's
That's
and the
hilarious.
picture, the photo it comes with.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pretty funny
Yeah,
photo.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the title, I mean, the first idea of the title was one of my mentors, my good friend of the family, Greg, one of my dad's clients way back when. He spoke Japanese really well, and he talked about how he was the barbarian. He's this like giant ex-marine dude that's like huge and bigger than life type of character, and speaks Japanese in a big booming voice. And he really embraced this idea of being the barbarian. And I thought that was hilarious. But what does he mean by that? And then it took me a while before I learned the gaijin word, and I go, oh, I was literally as outsider, and some people even translate it as barbarian. I came up with the idea after, basically, because I studied history in Japan. Japan is an isolated nation, even today, still in a way, because it's an island nation. But historically, I mean, it was a closed off nation for a long time when they had the feudal samurai system. Even when they were just warring states way back when, there weren't a lot of people that were just allowed straight into Japan. In fact, you can go all the way back to Khan and Kublai Khan and his attack on tried to attack Japan, and the kamikaze,
Saved it, but twice.
yeah, I know, and it's crazy to think about, but that's where that word came from. It's just this holy wind literally came and blew them all away, and it's totally true. You can still find those old ships that they tried to build to attack Japan there. And they were really afraid of coming in trying to beat the samurai because they knew that the Japanese were legendary fighters that way and would do anything to protect their land from outside barbarians, so to speak. So I mean, but the funny thing of it is that once it opened up, and I'm still starting to, I've written a lot about that chapter already. Gosh, there's a lot of material here. The point is that they were shocked when Perry first came over here, the first general from America that tried to say, "Yo, open the door,"
or else.
Or else, literally, they're booming their cannons, and it is this insane technology that Japan was just shocked by and awed by. So much so that America was not only let in, we were given extraterritorial rights for the longest time. For the first 10, 20 years, you could commit any crime you wanted in Japan and not even get in trouble for it. That's how crazy it was. That's how, I mean, I know that sounds a little bit nuts now, but it was a thing at one point in time. So yeah, people kind of quickly grew to love the bearded, hairy, gaijin. I mean, there was some interaction in different places. In Nagasaki, there was a little bit for during the closed off time. And there's even this group of people that studied just the Dutch because that's the only country that was allowed to.
Dutch learning.
The whole Dutch learning thing is crazy. That's how they learned anything. It was just Dutch learning basically equaled anything outside of Japan. Right.
Building clocks.
Building clocks. Or building guns. And all those things were considered Dutch learning. And you were an expert if you knew any Dutch about the outside world. Right.
Yeah. I was just thinking, you mentioned they let them in, right? They let the Americans in.
Mm-hmm.
That was the Japanese being practical. They looked at
Oh
those
yeah,
blacks and they said, "Holy shit, we can't compete with this. We're in trouble if we don't do something." So it's like it was a stalling tactic. And in
yeah,
the meantime, they sent people all over the world to learn from, catch up with, and surpass the West.
that's right.
And 50 years later, they had a world-class Navy fleet that blew the Russians out of the water. I mean, that's amazing.
Great
Zero.
history lesson. That's right. That's totally
Yeah.
true. And like it kind of started, I mean, a good but bad precedent, I think, for Japan of trying to copy every other country. That's how a lot of this ideology started, and this kind of inferiority complex with the West. Unfortunately, a lot of that started right there, right then, because they knew they were that far behind. They had to catch up. And so for the first 15, 20 years, it was quite crazy. And Japan was, the Meiji period started, and they were doing everything they could to modernize, but it was still people in kimonos, and there were still samurai around that were didn't like what was going on.
Dead end.
The whole Last Samurai movie is kind of based on that idea.
Yeah.
Except Tom Cruise is not that tall. So
Yeah.
He was definitely standing on a box. Sorry.
No, but here's the beautiful thing. I'm not tall either, but here in Atami, I'm kind of tall relative to everybody else here. So, but I to your point about they brought in culture, and yeah, on the one hand, I think the first step was copying stuff. But Maya and I recently talked about this. I'm fixed on the concept of the importance, just for everybody, of curating your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking about what the Japanese have been doing historically since they started bringing in Chinese culture.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they're looking at all this stuff and they're cherry picking, they're curating what fits. And they're either rejecting what doesn't or adjusting it to eventually make it fit. And I think the Japanese are masters at that kind of curation of ideas.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And this, like I said, it's the good and the bad. There's great things about that way of building a nation, and there's drawbacks. But essentially, the book title is just about that idea. I do a little bit of a history lesson. I talk about how now Japanese people, they still are just in awe when they see someone that doesn't look Japanese. And it's just that's what I'm saying. The barbarian is the joke, is we're not really barbarians, but we still are kind of sometimes treated like complete and total, oh my God, it's a giant person that looks different. Even if we're yeah, right. And it's people still get nervous. I'll speak perfect Japanese to someone and they start huh? They can't.
And they'll answer in English because they don't believe you.
and which is fine. And then when they answer in English, I just speak in English. It's fine with me. I used to get upset about that stuff, but not anymore. It's it's this kind of things you go through, those ebbs and flows when you first come to Japan, especially if you speak the language and you feel like people are just putting you down. They're not. They're just they still have this kind of ideology still lingering in their head that they are this small nation that nobody really likes, that nobody wants to come to, and they keep the people from outside out. And now that these outside people are coming in, they're just still amazed, despite the fact that they see hundreds a day. It's kind of weird, but it's definitely the case. And so I was talking about this idea from a couple angles. One is the way Japanese people act, and then how it feels, the whole kind of prejudice and racist thing. I mean, yeah, there's quite a lot of that, and a lot of it kind of comes down to just people don't get that we're just people. We're just people
We're just people, yes.
Yeah.
And it's always, once again, I believe that everybody would agree with me, but we very often, or we tend to misinterpret other people's shyness or other people's hesitancy to do this or that. And we misinterpret it as, unwillingness to connect, or, a willingness to isolate us or something. And most of the time it is not. It's always better to assume good intentions. Good
We
intentions.
assume bad intentions too often.
Too often. And that's really not only us, the foreigners. I think it happens with everybody. It's part of how our brains are wired, because our
Yeah.
brains need to protect us, and every sign of unfriendliness or danger, and it's just
Right.
there. And but if we're more aware and more intentional, or seeing that other people are not bad, they're more willing actually, and they're probably more afraid of us than we're afraid of them, then we'll become real ambassadors. It's much easier to reach out, it's much easier to communicate with them on a very human level. And then that's how everybody can be an ambassador of their own culture. I'm not talking about countries here, because basically we have physical borders of the countries, but more important is the mindset, and the mindset is really formed by the culture we have been born and raised in.
It's
Yeah.
true. 100%. Like, I agree with all that. And that's the thing. We need to try our best to think of how to break through that. Like, he said the word tate mai before. Like, it's very much this front. I can't remember if that was before we recorded or after now, but but that's a great word. The tate mai is like the front face the Japanese people show, which is also that nervous side. Like, but the hone, the inside part of it, is what you got to try to look at. And you got, if you can break through and you can just break that ice, you'll find out that they're fine. It's like, it's the nervous energy is silly. And that's kind of the truth with anybody you meet for the first time. It's just that, Japanese people seem particularly nervous sometimes at first. And I
Yes,
think a lot of it has to do with this isolated nation idea that, like, they don't, not every Japanese person either. Gosh, I've met crazy outgoing people here, and there's tons of them too. But,
Especially
like,
Osaka.
oh yeah, Osaka
I
is the one
love
part
Osaka.
of Japan that they say is a foreign country,
I
right?
love
yeah,
Osaka.
Yeah. Like,
I love it.
yes. I
they
have that. Yeah, sorry.
no, it's
Osaka,
okay.
because you say it's a foreign country, but the truth is that I have lived only in Sapporo and in Tokyo. So Osaka is still a foreign country to me. And I can tell you that when I went there, it's already 15 years ago. And so we stayed at a hotel, which is near Namba Station. And at
Mm,
night, we went to look for a restaurant to have dinner, and walked through the Shotengai there. And suddenly I saw that really beautifully made up 70 or maybe 80-year-old lady who was in a bright pink, hot pink cocktail
mm,
dress, also
mhm,
wearing high heels, and she was riding a mamachari. And
mhm,
then riding that mamachari in that beautiful outfit, and her hair was up and everything. And my jaw dropped, right? And
Yeah.
then my husband, when he saw my reaction, he said, "Don't stare, don't stare, don't stare, because that could be a mafia woman." And I was like, you know,
It's nice to have that
like,
right.
insider baseball there. If
yes,
can I tell a quick story about,
yes,
because
go ahead.
it relates to Osaka being like a foreign country. So I'm pretty sure it was the end of 1981. So I lived with a Japanese lead guitar player for a semi-big band called Sandy and the Sunsets. And they just formed in 1980. Before that, they were called Yuyake Gakudan. They
Mm,
played like Little Feat type of, roots music. But then they converted to what was then New Wave, right? So the end of 81, it's Christmas time, and their roadie called in sick. So Kenny comes to me, he goes, "We need a roadie. You want to be a roadie for and go on this tour with us?" I go, "Oh, great, yeah, I'll do it." And so the tour, it started in Tokyo, then it went to Osaka, then it went to Kyoto, and then it went to Kanazawa. Okay.
Yeah,
So for the first time ever, I had seen my friend's band play, but I was in the audience, right? So the first time ever, I'm behind the stage now, and I'm looking at the audience. At first, it's Tokyo, and the audience is very like all together, clapping together.
mm,
It was very like almost choreographed, right? Their response. And then we go to Osaka, and I'm backstage, and they're going, "Ah!" They're all in there. They're all crazy, like they're acting like I'm like I feel like I'm back in America. And that was my first exposure to Osaka. And of course, we go to Kyoto, and it was much more refined and quieter.
yeah,
Not that far
Kyoto's
away.
different.
But anyway, that was my first impression of Osaka. Yeah.
yeah,
It's pretty much like that. People can get very wild and crazy. Just I mean, I just went like recently to a friend's punk rock show, and I love punk. I'm from Seattle, so I was in the grunge years, Nirvana,
Yeah.
Soundgarden, all those great bands. I was a teenager at that time, and so I was very into going out and being in the mosh pits. And I was a football player too, so I loved it. I was like, bam, bam, yeah, I like love this stuff. And like the other day, I went to a punk show, and it's not too often that you go to a punk show and people get crazy like that, but it does happen, and it happened to very suddenly to the point I got knocked down on the ground. And I was on the ground. I was like, oh my god, I feel like an idiot. I do not look cool. Like I should have been ready for that. And like people are trying to grab me and pull me up, but I'm a big guy. They couldn't get me up. And like finally got up, and I'm like, I'm gonna go to the back. I think I'm just gonna watch this for a little bit. Maybe I should just take it a little bit easy here. But it's true. Like that, people will go nuts, and like when they're ready to go nuts, and like people are just a little bit extroverted here, and like an over the
Yes.
top way sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, the crazy ladies on the Mama Charlie. There's all kinds of. They're not all yakuza. They're not all mafia.
No,
Like,
I believe they are not. I believe they're
no,
not.
they're not. But like,
That was
but
your
they
husband's
definitely
mom,
they definitely could be. And so like you need to take,
just in
you know,
case.
just in case, I mean, it's just like we get stared at, I mean, it's not nice to stare back too much. I mean, you see
Right.
all
Yeah.
kinds of crazy types everywhere. We have this problem sometimes as expats coming over trying to fit all culture onto Japanese people. And this is another part of the chapter I'm going to talk about. This is
Right.
kind of the
Yeah.
not slightly as nice side of it. This idea that we have to put all of our ideology and make Japan be this or that is a little bit odd, and I think sometimes a little bit smug. Like an
Mm.
ideology, I get tired of it when people do it too much. We're all
Yeah.
guilty. We're all guilty of it. Tim just was
We
saying,
are.
like,
Yeah.
we're all guilty of it, and like we all do it. And like I admit, I get like this too. I get preachy. I get in my soapbox once in a while.
Yeah.
I say I get too like I'm lecturing people, but usually it's coming from a place of good. Though I'm just trying to say there's other ways to look at this. You guys should probably try to think not just about what's Japanese, but what other people think too. And
Right.
like, but then help it reflect on what you think, what is Japanese? What kind of identity do I want to have? What should Japanese values and morals
Mm.
be? I think they don't have to be the same as every other Western culture.
Yeah.
But there's a lot, I mean, there's another chapter in the book that's going to be about like fads, like this idea that like, Japanese people get too into these things that like, Westerners bring over. Let's use a simple, easy one like environmentalism, for example.
Mm, mm,
I
mm.
think environmentalism is great, but like I get the feeling sometimes when I talk to people, they don't know that much about it. They just think
Right.
it's a fad. It's a cool thing to be
Yeah.
involved with.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like they don't tend to understand the issues as much as I would hope they would. So
Mhm.
like, sometimes people think they're doing a lot of good by saying, be an environmentalist, do this, do this, do this, do this to Japanese people. And sometimes instead of just saying do it, you got to show them like not them doing it, it's you doing it. You show
Yeah.
by your example.
Right. Yes.
And a lot of people
I know a lot of Americans who do that too, though.
Yeah.
They don't know what's good for the environment.
No, or
think they know.
or they think they know everything about it, and they get too preachy about it too. It's a bit of both. It's a double-edged sword. It's like, I mean, it's not. You can't say you know everything about an issue unless you're like what, a geologist, like scientist.
Yeah.
You know the weather. You're not a scientist, then you can't really know, right? Like you're not studying the data yourself. And there's an awful lot we don't understand about what's going on with the environment right now. Like, yeah, humans shouldn't be doing what we're doing. No way. I want clean air. I want clean water. This is the way I explain it. Like, can't we just start with that? Like, that's a pretty thing. It's not a thing we all want. Well, then good. Let's all agree on that instead of arguing about the reasons for it. Like, let's clean things, That's the way I try to think about it. But I know it's just me. And like, we're all hypocritical by nature. We kind of touched on this. Like, I mean, humans are just that way. I don't like to use the word hypocrite because it sounds negative, but it's really the truth. We'll say one thing. Yeah, we're contradicting what we say all the time. And like we don't often see it, which is why I like to use the word hypocrite. That's the problem. We don't see our own blind spots. And so
no, we don't. We really have to jump out of our own environment and our own pond once again in order to
yes,
find some of our blind spots. And because doing that once does not suffice, it's not enough.
yes.
I want to hook you up, Deron, with our friend
Sure.
James Scott Brew.
Okay.
He's a drummer. He loves grunge. Okay, that's
Okay,
one.
good. Excellent.
Two, he's an
He'll be my kind of
architect.
guy.
He's an architect. So my nickname for him is Art Vandelay. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, no, the Vandalay Corporation, yes.
And he's also like a serious environmentalist. Like he thinks about it at a levels.
Yeah. I think
Follow
it's
him
important.
I could give you his name and you can follow him on LinkedIn. He's a good guy. He does good.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm all about it. Like, I mean, I'm definitely I like what people do when they're activists, but you got to think about when you're doing activism. I mean, like it's not about making people think the way you think. It's about showing through example what's a good example to do. That's how you win hearts and minds. And
Another thing that I find very human, of course. So we all are guilty of that. Once we form our, let's say, perception of something, we refuse to change it more often than not. And that's the case. It's been the case with me myself too. I find it very difficult to actually get over myself sometimes and go and look into opinions that are different from mine. And I believe that we all are guilty of that. And if we can really try hard to do that, and it's not, I don't say that we have to necessarily change our opinions, but if we at least try to see the other person's point of view and try to understand where they come from, then it would be so much better and so much easier for everybody around us. And I find,
strategic information, knowing what they think.
Yes.
Whether you're wrong, it's still really important information.
Yes. And then if I have to say, I find it, how can I put it? I think that the Japanese and the other Asian nations are better at doing that than us coming from the Western part of the world. Because once we get set in our own way, we really tend to go down that road without much, consideration of the others around us. And the Japanese, the Chinese, the Koreans, and also I can say, I have talked with my Malaysian friends. They have the same opinion. They say, we think that we can all coexist together and we don't have to agree necessarily with each other, but it doesn't prevent us from being friends and living together, working together, always good, right? So it's quite difficult to hear many people say so in the Western part of this.
It helps develop.
Yeah,
there's an awful lot of division at the moment. Like, this is the thing. Like, I'm being a musician, being a creative artist. This is what music's all about. Look, if you play a song that everybody likes, everyone in the room's going to enjoy it. Everyone's going to come together for a moment, and they're going to forget everything that they disagree on. And that's what's great about art and music, and that's a thing that we need to get back in touch with as a species. I think I teach music to kids, and this is a huge point I teach, that ancient people didn't just sit around a fire and sing because they were told to. They did it every day because they were literally connecting to the skies, connecting to God or whatever it was who they were singing to. And they were like trying to make this huge vibration, and everyone danced and everyone participated. And guess how much stress they felt?
Yeah.
Right.
They didn't feel any stress. They didn't feel any problems. They were all together as one big tribe. And like, that's the thing. That's the power of music. It's the power of art. And if people can just focus on those things more, I think we as expats can do a better job at helping Japanese people maybe understand a few things they could do better at. Like, but we don't need to force it down their throats. That's just the thing that and I don't think Japanese people need to take it either. They tend to take it a little too much. I think that they would do better to like think about what's good for Japan, what's good for us, what's good for this country. Like, I have no problem with Japanese people standing up for themselves a bit more. Doesn't mean that they have to be like
confrontational.
Yeah, they don't need to be confrontational, but they
Yeah.
definitely should feel proud of some things that they believe in as a people, and they should probably be proud about the idea that, hey, Japan can be its own country, be a leader, like in Asia. It could be like there's so many things that, like, if they just thought about it a little bit more outside the box, or they just concentrated on what's good for them instead of what everyone else thinks is good for them, I think things might go better here. Could solve a lot of issues and problems that modern Japan has.
I think they've quietly become, though, a soft power leader. And what's amazing is they don't promote themselves. And anime and manga and all the Japanese arts, that's also bringing people together who have different ideologies, right? So I love that aspect of it. I don't know if they realize how much power they have in the soft power arena, right?
I hear you. And like, yeah, soft power. That's an interesting way to think about it. I like that. And like the thing is that, yeah, the culture, pop culture is another subject I'm going to talk about in the book. But the way that pop culture is just booming right now. I mean, grief, when I was in the music business, we were trying our darndest to try to get every Japanese singer to sing properly in English because we thought that was the only way music would ever be sold. Nowadays, these bands are famous and they make an English version, but no one likes it. They like the Japanese version of the song.
Yeah,
like, that's what's popular. That's what's booming all over the place. And like, boy, it's cool. It's cool. I mean, they do speak English pretty well, though, the artists today. They try to speak in English because they know that's the language everyone will understand when they're on the stage. And like, it's getting there. I mean, Japan's starting to understand that they can be proud of their language and their culture.
Yes.
These things, they don't need to change everything to cater to other people.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, yes, before we are getting close to 9 o'clock and before we say goodbye to everybody, I just wanted to say, in line with what you just mentioned, Darren, that here in Tokyo, I have seen some of the best speakers of Spanish, German, Russian, and other languages that are not as popular in this part of the world as English is. And all of them, my Japanese colleagues, they can speak Spanish and French and also Turkish, and Russian, as I said, and it's fascinating. And I listen to them and I feel ashamed because I come from Europe where those languages are spoken and they speak them, just like they were born there. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And so suddenly, the stereotype I had of Japanese people not being good at languages went up in the air. It's really interesting because, and I'm not saying that everybody is good at languages because not everybody is, but seeing those people, talking with him, hearing them speak those languages, it has been an eye opener to me. And I have to say though that 24 years when I came to Japan, there weren't so many people speaking English and any other foreign languages for that matter. But now the number of Japanese who speak them has increased tremendously, and they really put a lot of effort into that because of what you said. They do know that English, for example, is widely understood, and they want to communicate and talk with people who are not native Japanese either. So. Well, but thank you very much for that. And it's 8:59 now.
I think we could have you on 10 more times and not run out of
Yes,
stuff to talk about.
yes.
Yeah, I'll be happy to come back. I love talking about this stuff.
And at some future podcast, I'd like you to talk about making it in the music industry, teaching kids. And I have a lot of really good, talented musician friends who have struggled because of the lack of work. And I think many of them could benefit by listening to you, someone who's making a living on maybe a future topic. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, I can
Yes,
tell you it's not easy at all. But yeah, there are ways to do it. Like, I mean, you just have to think about it the right way and you have to focus on it, you know. But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that
that's
would be great.
sure.
Let's talk about it
Yeah,
again sometime.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's,
Cool.
yes, let's, yeah, I would love to have you on the show again. And well, with that, I want to say also thank you to everybody who stayed with us, listened in, and who is probably going to listen to us later today and later this week. It has been a pleasure to have you, Darren, with us today. And as Tim said, let's continue the conversation. And the last thing I want to do this morning, Wednesday morning, is once again to give a plug to our two sponsors. That's Kanchu and Houze Inc. We are rooting for you. Yes. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
Now, time to dance. Oh wait, no music.
Yes.